Hello and welcome to New Game Plus. I am not Jason or Don, I am actually Shane, and I'm joined by the ever magnificent Meg.
Appreciate that. It's a sick gamer tag. I might change it up.
Well, actually, we've got a pretty big episode. We've just come off the TGF time, and there's been actually a lot of stuff that happened at TGF that was a little bit different. Like we had the biggest Street Fighter V tournament that wasn't the Capcom finals. It's like they just had it randomly there at TGF. It was a really good tournament, and it just almost came out of nowhere though.
The entire New Game Plus team are at Tokyo Game Show and they're having the time of their lives. Essentially, we're getting Snapchats every day of these new Mario Kart racing they're doing in Shibuya and everything like that. And we've really seen some exciting releases and launches at this Tokyo Game Show. Like the new Death Stranding trailer. I still don't know what the game's about, but it looks amazing.
It's got to be something there soon. Hopefully we can get a little bit more gameplay soon.
I love the drip feed though, it's strong.
Yeah, it is strong. But we should probably talk about the episode that we're actually airing, which the first thing we've got on, I believe, is a review that you've got.
Yeah, I was really excited to review Telltale's The Walking Dead, the final season. And literally the day after I reviewed it, the whole studio shut down. So I'm actually unsure if it's going to get completed at all. And I wanted to talk about the fact the games industry and the things that happen behind the scenes of all those favorite games that you love every day and all the things that people behind the scenes experience.
So we've also actually got maybe on the side of that and on the level with Don, which is, I guess, the esports welfare of esport players. So it's more about if they're not the top tier, if it's kind of actually even worthwhile kind of thing.
Exactly. And once you reach that level, is it sustainable? And how can you live off that kind of income?
We've also got a review of Shadow of the Tomb Raider, which I think you bring also.
Tomb Raider got me into gaming and I was super pumped to review it. And it's my first solo one I've done for a while.
Well, I guess let's just get straight into it.
Enjoy.
So a few years ago, quite a few years ago now actually, in 2012, we were actually kind of blown away by The Walking Dead from Telltale Games. This was a game that was light on what's traditionally considered gameplay, I guess, but it really, really impressed people and drew them into this narrative and the characters and the journey that they went through. Since then, Telltale's done a few things. They've done quite a few more games, and not all of them have lived up to the standard, but now we have Telltale's The Walking Dead, the final season. And Meg, you've been playing it, you've been diving in. Where are you at right now?
Look, it's suffice to say that I'm one of the biggest fans of Telltale and anything they release ever. So when the final season was announced and the first episode released recently, even though the game isn't fully released yet at this stage of filming, I just had to do this segment. I'm so passionate about it. Essentially, the franchise takes place within Robert Kirkman's comic book universe as per usual, and we see Clem now as a young woman who is looking after a small child called Alvin Jr. Essentially, we've begun to see her in 2012 defending herself from zombie hordes in a cubby house and having a really influential mentor called Lee. And now the roles are reversed. So now she's looking after AJ and she rescued him from a group of bandits at the end of season 2. And the fact that this is the final season is really heart-wrenching for me because I feel like I've seen her grow up and I'm extremely emotionally connected to this franchise. I'm super excited about this, Jack, because not only now is it the final, but it actually feels way more polished and perfected. The dialogue choices finally seem meaningful and complex, so the story develops.
So how many seasons in are we to The Walking Dead at this point?
3, yeah.
So this is the third one?
This is the third. This is the final. And essentially, you can tell now that Telltale have really learned from their mistakes and stopped releasing annual titles, even if it's just none of them are trash, but they've really taken the time to perfect this final season, and it's completely flawless as far as I can see. The character development is so exciting, as it's not really a spoiler, but Clem walks into this new community run by kids, so it has a really toned down thing. Instead of all the other franchises seem to have adults that are angry, frustrated,
high stakes,
totally. And now there's a lot of new story arcs that we are yet to see, and I can't wait for them to develop.
Awesome.
The graphics are now 4K Ultra HD, and the visual style is comic book. It looks like hand-drawn. It's very detailed and beautiful, and I think I'm most excited now because the action and the quick time events are more complex, plus there's puzzles now, and it sort of feels like a little bit more
like a more complete product, I guess.
Exactly, it's so polished. So over the next few months, we'll see Telltale drip feed the episodes until it concludes. And I'm really sad to see that Clementine's story arc will finally be over, but at least we know that it's going to be a thrilling, adrenaline-driven title.
15 years ago, we heard stories about South Korea and how people in that country were making a living playing StarCraft professionally, and that the best were treated like rock stars. Hopefully their trajectory doesn't follow that of actual rock stars because, ugh. It seemed like such a foreign concept back then. Fast forward to today, however, and professional esports has become well and truly established worldwide. Players like Dendi and Faker are household names. Colleges are offering scholarships for the best in esports, which means a way into college without crippling debt or crippling concussions. And every other weekend seems to host a tournament that rewards hundreds of thousands of dollars. You may look at all of this and figure that the world of esports is all glamour and fortune, screaming fans and ad deals like this one.
Sunsilk base elements. Geez, you're a pretty boy.
Ease up, mate.
Hey, it's feeling soft and shiny, mate.
It's for blokes.
Yep, that's some Oscar award-winning acting right there. But much like the Magpies' acting ability, the dream of making it rich in esports is an illusion. Let's begin with the biggest honeypot, Dota 2. At the International Dota 2 Championships in August, winners OG took home $11 million out of a total prize pool of over $25 million. And Dota 2 tournaments have rewarded over $170 million in prize money since 2011. That is enough to buy you infinite copies of Dota 2 because that game is free to play. Free to play. However, the vast majority of teams will never see more than a fraction of this. Due to marquee tournaments like the International, it should come as no surprise that $75 million of this total prize money, 44% of it, has been earned by only 5 teams. I play video games to escape the cold reality of inequality, not to be confronted by it. It's great that the best teams can be so healthily rewarded, but that's also the problem with professional Dota. It's so heavily top-loaded. The concept of a Tier 2 or a minor league doesn't exist with many games, but it's especially not existent for Dota. Valve has the capacity to support amateur Dota, and it certainly has the funds. Its income from digital hats alone would be able to buy an actual miniature hat for every pet dog in Australia. Even a fraction of the international prize pool would go far in fostering the big names in Dota. But for the moment, if your team can't qualify for TI or the Dota majors, then odds are your team isn't earning enough money to sustain itself. And even if you do, a few bad matches can leave a team's members with nothing, especially those whose payments are mostly dependent on prize splits. However, there are esports that guarantee its player salaries and working benefits. The Overwatch League promoted its inaugural season by proudly announcing that its players had salary, healthcare, and retirement benefits. Hooray! The $7 billion company achieved the bare minimum for its employees. But even with these relatively respectable benefits, Overwatch League competitors were still subjected to strenuous working conditions. Just look at the Shanghai Dragons. Its manager Yang Van admitted early in the season that his players' training regime involved 72-hour working weeks. Odds are that the people that made the Shanghai Dragons jerseys had better working conditions. This is not a winning strategy, literally. The Shanghai Dragons ended up bottom on the Overwatch League ladder with 0 match wins. Overwatch? More like overworked, am I right? No, don't reward me for that one. Not now, not ever. At least the members of the Shanghai Dragons can rely on that base income. The same can't be said for the vast majority of people trying to make it in esports. In the fighting game community, for instance, there are stories of top-tier players having to skimp on the basics like food and accommodation. Pro Street Fighter competitor Li Joe has said that during tournaments he slept on floors, under sinks, and on park benches outside. That homeless chic may work for Derek Zoolander, but it shouldn't work for the best in Street Fighter. And this problem is exacerbated in the local scene where there just isn't enough sponsorship money to go around. Some players may have a big enough Twitch following to sustain themselves with subscriptions and donations, but here in Australia, even the best fighting game players have to resort to working part-time to supplement their income, whether it be as baristas or retail assistants or insurance reps, or actually, scratch that last one. An insurance rep getting into fighting? It's way too far-fetched of an idea. This is a vicious cycle, because if they have to work, they can't practice to keep up with the pros, which makes full-time esporting even less viable, which makes them rely on outside work more and more, and on it goes. It's the second worst Infinite combo, right behind Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. The long and short of it is that it is nigh on impossible to make any sort of livable income through esports. You literally have more chance of making money by winning the lottery whilst being struck by lightning, or while singing Kylie Minogue's I Should Be So Lucky. Most likely, you'll schlep from tournament to tournament, incurring travel expenses and tournament fees along the way. And If you're lucky, you may make some of that back, but in the end, it's a net loss. So that has been the latest installment in the New Game Plus Wet Blanket Glower Hour. That is not all bad. I'm neglecting the other vital reason why so many people in gaming tournaments compete, because they love the game and the community surrounding it. And at the end of the day, if you enjoy mastering a game and proving your worth in public, that's reward enough. Money's just a bonus. And besides, at least you won't have to appear in the esports equivalent of this. God, it's terrible. And that is everything that has happened in the world, ever.
Well, the one thing I find myself noticing more and more nowadays is open world gaming fatigue, where a lot of the critically acclaimed games that are coming out recently all demand that you spend so much time exploring every single nook and cranny of its universe. And sometimes I just want a game that I can just sit down, play, and not worry about that kind of stuff. One game in particular that I've recently played and constantly going back to is Hakoniwa Explorer Plus on Steam and some other outlets on PC. Now this is a game where you play as a nameless boy or girl as you explore the environment, fight perilous enemies, and touch the biggest of butts. I'm not kidding on that one, but let's go straight into it. So the game is an action RPG. It's very simplistic in its premise, where you just you fight enemies, you collect loot, and then you move on to the next environments or the next dungeons. Again, that's all there is to it. There's no overarching branching narrative. You just go around the towns and you navigate, you fight enemies. That's all you need to do. What I find really good about it is the fact that it's unapologetic in its premise. It doesn't apologize for being anything but that. It's a game that doesn't really exactly demand that you do anything else except for spend as much time as you want in the game. And that's really good. It's a really kind of good perspective on things. Another genius aspect I find about the game in particular is the fact that you can kind of think outside of the box in thanks to its wonderful programming. In a sense, for example, if you need to go fight a particular enemy and exploit its weaknesses, for example, if you fight an ice enemy and you need to find yourself a fire blade, instead of having to backtrack all the way to the nearest town to go buy one, you can instead go just hold the equipped blade that you have over an exposed torch or flame, and then suddenly you have yourself a flame blade. No backtracking, and it doesn't ruin the pacing of the game either, which is also an added bonus. Now, if there's a couple of criticisms I have about the game in particular, it's definitely its item and its menu management. While its menu management is very simple in its premise, you'll find that you're constantly backtracking or picking up items and constantly having to throw them out. And a lot of these sub-menus are actually put in the one area, so you'll find yourself, instead of items that you want to equip, you'll accidentally drop them, all because of the menu is just a little bit kind of cluttered. Another thing as well is that its sense of humor is also a little bit kind of polarizing. There's going to be a lot of butt jokes, there's going to be self-referential humor about the conventions of JRPG, and it pokes fun at itself in a really kind of sardonic, eye-rolling way, so your mileage is going to vary on that one. But despite those differences, I still find that Hakoniwa Explorer Plus is a game that I find myself constantly going back to. It's a game that's very simple in its premise, it's unapologetic, and in a world where all the critically acclaimed games coming out recently are games that you need to spend so many hours on to get that payoff, I find that this perspective with Hakoniwa is quite refreshing.
Tomb Raider was one of the first games that got me into gaming many moons ago, so I thought it was fitting that I reviewed the final chapter of the trilogy that has just been released at the beginning of the AAA release season. Reminiscing on a franchise that's over 20 years old now, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, developed by Square Enix, is the third-person action adventure that provides a satisfying closure to what has been a top-tier reimagining series. Tomb Raider and Rise of the Tomb Raider beforehand delivered a unique action series with a huge emotional connection to family and uncovering the truth. The intense, gritty origin story of Lara Croft and her journey from a frightened young woman to now a badass survivor continues in the final chapter of the rebooted franchise. Armed only with raw instincts, insane archaeologist knowledge, and the ability to push beyond the limits of human endurance, Lara makes me feel slightly inadequate as a human being as she effortlessly fights to unravel the dark history of the evil corporation, Trinity. Dr. Dominguez, whilst uncovering all of the answers to the mystery surrounding Silver Crown Mountain. In this ambitious finale, Shadow skips the traditional flashback origin story and throws you straight in as if you're already up to speed with the franchise. Set in South America, Lara must prevent a frightening apocalypse by locating another ancient relic, with the assistance of loyal friend Jonah. By the way, he's a total swag lord, ancient, and who clearly has a crush on her, and the changing dynamic between them is super entertaining as it unfolds. To really showcase the pace of the game, we start off with Lara and Jonah in a horrific plane crash, where the events flash back to 2 days earlier. They land separately and attempt to reunite, and the exploration begins in what feels like the largest open world we've seen in this franchise so far. The lack of user interface makes you feel like you're actually watching a 4K movie. One thing I loved is the initial gorgeous typography tips, and the instructions, also known as world space, is locked onto the environment and moves with a camera perspective. Totally pretty. This game is super dirty, gritty, and wet. And one of the reasons why I love action-adventure games so much, and what Tomb Raider consistently nails, is the stomach drop feeling of vertigo as you jump and climb through the world. I love scrambling up walls and wall running, but now the added level of rappelling yourself down the mountains whilst jumping off cliffs and reattaching your grappling hooks mid-air, it's awesome. The incredible camera angles really give you a sense of height and danger at all times. Lara embraces swimming underwater. However, there's no gauge to monitor your oxygen levels. The vibration of your controller actually increases when you swim faster, making you lose air quicker. The feeling of claustrophobia is real. Now, if you're keen for a bit of a challenge, or to make the game easier in my case, I appreciate that you can adjust the difficulty independently throughout the game across the 3 main styles of gameplay: puzzle solving, environment, navigation, and combat. The open world environments are explorative to an extent, with always something small to uncover and reward your curiosity. Loot boxes with money and gear, trees and shrubs for medicine, and equipment to craft weapons. Again, the vibration of your controller for subtle in-game hints, like digging for artifacts and loot, is helpful. However, I don't really feel like discovering the relics and going out of your way to find those monoliths really add a whole lot to the gameplay or offer a real reason to go and find them at all. The combat continues to be as addictive as the previous games, and I've got to say, it's the most satisfying feeling when you absolutely nail that stealth takedown using flamey bow and arrows. Photo mode is a cute addition to boost the social media engagement, similar to the new Spider-Man game. It allows players to set up the perfect photo while they're playing by manually tweaking camera positions, filters, borders, changing facial expressions, and even adding the game logo to the corner of the frame. So you can share to Facebook or Twitter using a hashtag. And Square Enix has decided that they want to share the best photos that are uploaded each month on their socials. Overall, the Shadow of the Tomb Raider is a true extension of the much-loved franchise that provides closure to the journey that Lara started back in 2013. The formula of exploration and puzzles, and don't forget the gruesome slow-motion death scenes, they're all extremely satisfying when you finally nail that troublesome mission. And it's refreshing enough to feel new. But if you haven't played any of the 3 games yet, do yourself a favor and start from the start. It comes out at the perfect time to scratch that Red Dead 2 or Last of Us 2 itch, and is a must-play.
So I'm kind of a big fan of the old Tomb Raider games, and I'm maybe not the biggest fan of the new stuff. Maybe it's more the crafting kind of style like that. I'm not that big at that kind of style of game. But I do see why there's a lot of people that really enjoy this kind of stuff.
Yeah, the third-person action-adventure genre really ticks all my boxes because I also have a huge emotional connection to the Lara Croft franchise. Essentially, Tomb Raider really nails and consistently nails the ability to really get that adrenaline factor, the heightened sense of danger, and when you fall, you feel like you're falling with Lara, and I think that's just one of the best feelings ever. I think it just absolutely nails it.
And when you die, you feel like you're also dying because it's that gruesome.
Yeah, it's actually disgusting. Like the faded black and white, getting mauled to death by a bear is kind of hilarious. It's really great.
Talking about getting mauled by a bear, let's segue that into our Telltale games.
That was excellent, by the way. So I had the pleasure of reviewing The Walking Dead, the final season, episode 1, but the day after I reviewed that here in the studio, the studio announced they were closing without any notice. They let all their employees go without a severance package, and were even recruiting up until the week prior to their shutting down. People moved interstate, bought a new house, put their children into a new school, and they were let go without any explanation. And other than that, the sales just weren't as they forecasted. They actually had multiple projects on the go, and I'm really sad that we won't see things like The Wolf Among Us and other projects like that. Yeah,
it's a little bit of a sad story, but the problem is it's not just Telltale that these are kind of happening. It's just that now that they're closed, all the stories are being told, but there's so much more going out there that we just don't hear about, and it's all being, swept under the rug kind of thing. Yeah,
a lot of the employees have gone to social media to talk about their experiences because they weren't treated fairly, and they've highlighted things like unpaid overtime and really tough working conditions when there's a crunch time and a deadline that they're not on time for, and they need to make it, so they do what they have to do to stay back and get it done. And I think it does reflect a lot of the Australian video games industry as well. Those
Yeah.
themes have come up time and time again over time. I think it's really important to highlight that finding that work-life balance is super important, but for employers to identify that as well and set realistic deadline expectations.
Yeah.
But I think it's really sad because episode 1 of the final season was one of the strongest episodes I think I've ever played out of any of their games ever. They put a lot of passion and took their time on it, and it really reflected the quality. And until onto this day, the lawsuit and the unraveling of this situation changes day in, day out. And it's time will tell if we'll even see it at all. People are putting their hand up to pay for buy the rights
Yeah.
to the franchise, and I just wish that they would stay away. They can't taint this beautiful franchise.
Yeah, that's a slightly scary note. But
Yeah.
let's get on a little bit happier note. We're going to have our Tokyo Game Show staff coming back to hopefully next
Yes.
week. So they'll be back in
We
here
miss you. Come back.
for the next episode of New Game Plus. And I guess if you want to see more of us, please follow us at New Game Plus on Twitter, Twitch, and even Instagram.
Our website as well has some excellent reviews.
Well, I guess we'll see you next guys week.
Thanks for having us.